Well, our guest tonight is someone who's had 43 years of legal experience as a prosecutor with the government, working in Chicago's Cook County, prosecuting drugs. And he has seen the failure of drug prohibition, and we're going to talk about this case that's going on right now because it's at a personal level. What's happening to this family, how their lives are being destroyed over possession of a small amount of marijuana. And then we're going to pull that out to a much larger picture, and we're going to talk about where this is all coming from. Our guest tonight is James Gierach. He's with LEAP, that's Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And Jim attended a conference of the UN in Vienna in March, and he's going to tell us what the UN is trying to do with drug prohibition. Welcome, Jim. What do you think about this crazy story that's going on in Tampa?
David, it's good to be with you. I read this story in the Tampa Bay News, and it's really an outrage. Here we've got Tampa dad on the run after kidnapping sons, and it's a case where our war on drugs has converted a mechanical engineer into a kidnapper of his own two children, ages 2 and 4, the kids in PJs. The story so offended me that I wrote my own headlines for the story. And rather than complaining about the parents or the father, I think the complaint should be against American drug policy. And the headline should read, "Parents Kidnap Kids from Grandma. Grandma Refuses Son-in-Law Use of Family Car. Florida Turns Engineer into Criminal. And Drug War Nullifies Parentage."
That's right.
It's absurd.
It's amazing that they could take their children away from them for possession of what is reportedly less than a gram of marijuana.
You know, here in the state of Washington, we've got public officials standing on the podium endorsing marijuana legalization, marijuana sales. We have presidents of the United States. We have Supreme Court justices who've used marijuana. And here we're going to criminalize some engineer and his family for trying to recover his 2 children because an idiotic prohibition law has turned a father and a mother, or at least at the moment a father, into a criminal, a burglar, a kidnapper,
yes,
an armed and dangerous, crazed person for trying to recover their children.
And don't forget to add to your list our own president, who has admitted that he smoked quite heavily.
I said presidents, I certainly included Barack Obama.
That's right.
And I didn't inhale president as well.
That's right, Bill Clinton. That's right. But you know what I'm really saddened by is to see how the media, as well as the police departments, have hyped this. We're seeing media headlines saying that they had narcotics in the presence of their children and dangerous drug paraphernalia, you know, of like rolling paper or a pipe or something like that in the presence of their children. It's absolutely insane. And yet, marijuana is a big part of the war on drugs, isn't it? Isn't it more than half of the people that are incarcerated are marijuana charges?
Marijuana is medicine. Marijuana is what's being approved by voters for medical purposes across the United States, around the world. We have prohibition in place that according to a recent report, the Drug Threat Assessment 2011 in the United States, Mexico produces 21,500 tons of marijuana a year. As I sit here in the Chicago area in front of my computer screen, a Mexican drug cartel came in and 2 miles from my home planted 6,000 marijuana plants. We go down the road about 2 miles, and the following summer, they plant 4,000 marijuana plants in the McGinnis Woods. And my daughter lives on the north side of the city of Chicago, and they had a 4,000 plant seizure. These huge seizures of drugs are evidence of the drug war failure, not of drug war success, and just shows the drug war causes what it was designed to prevent. We intentionally try to drive up the price of drugs so that these commodities end up the most valuable commodity on the face of the earth, encouraging people to supply more and more drugs which are uncontrolled and unregulated, thanks to our war on drugs.
And I call it the war of drugs, because it is something that benefits not only the drug pushers and the organized crime families, but it's something that benefits government from top to bottom. It gives them authorization to do all kinds of civil liberties violations. It lets them create massive bureaucracies. And we had an article that just came out this week, a couple of days ago, from Russia Today, saying that 1 million have died from Afghanistan heroin drug production, that it's 40 times higher since NATO went into Afghanistan, and that the Afghanistan that we control, that the U.S. military controls, is now producing 90% of the poppy-based drugs throughout the world.
David, 82% of Americans recognize that the war on drugs is a failure. It's been in place because of United Nations treaties since 1961. It's been in place in the United States since Nixon declared a war on drugs in 1971. And yet, even though it's failed and 82% of the people know it's a failure, nonetheless, it's still in place. And someone has to ask the question, why? The people know it doesn't work. Law enforcement knows it doesn't work. And the answer to the question is because the good guys are riding the drug war gravy train, just like the drug cartels and the street gangs are. The good guys and the bad guys are on the same side of the line of scrimmage. Al Capone was in favor of prohibition. The drug cartels are in favor of prohibition.
Yes.
The street gangs are in favor of prohibition. The good guys who build the prisons so that it was the fastest growing housing in the United States during the 1990s are in favor of prohibition. The 100,000 policemen Clinton said we got to hire because we got so much drug prohibition crime are in favor of the war on drugs. The communities and the cities and the villages and the chiefs of police are in favor of the war on drugs because they get to forfeit the drug dealers' riches and make them their riches.
Yes, absolutely, without a trial.
So without a trial, and then you wonder about why would the TV and the media in Tampa cover this this absolutely crazy story about the father kidnapping his 2-year-old and 4-year-old with the help of the mother.
Yes.
It's absurd. Yes. It's because $400 million a year in anti-drug money goes to TV and radio stations to put anti-drug messages on.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if that explains the ridiculous coverage, but the TV and the radio and the newspapers in Florida should be all over the drug war with 2 feet, with a stranglehold around anyone who supports drug prohibition and this war on drugs that, number one, causes what it was designed to prevent, i.e. puts more drugs uncontrolled and unregulated everywhere. Secondly, is the heart of the guns, the gangs, the crime, the prisons, the terrorism, the deficits, the healthcare crisis, the bullet holes and uninsured kids. It is the war on drugs, which is public enemy number one, a war on drugs favored by the United States when we go to the United Nations, like this Commission on Narcotic Drugs in Vienna this last month.
Before we get to that,
sure.
Jim, you know, it is such an amazing failure. It's so much worse than the original prohibition against alcohol. We never had a situation with alcohol where they took people's children away from them because they caught them with a little bit of bathtub gin. We never had a situation then when these people grab their children and try to run, and the media sensationalizes it and demonizes these people to the extent that something that is already a tragedy. Here, these people's lives has already been destroyed. And now they may literally be destroyed. They may be shot and killed because they've labeled them as armed and dangerous. They call them anti-government terrorists, even though the people in Louisiana said there was no anti-government rally. They say that they're perhaps death cultists because the word Armageddon was used, and yet we know from postings of this guy that he's a secular atheist. You know, he's not part of any religious death cult or anything. So they're creating this narrative, sensationalizing this, and instead of examining this and looking at this and saying, how did we get to this point? How did this small amount of marijuana that is so widely used, as you pointed out, so many people who are in very prominent positions have used, so many people throughout this country have used, do we really want to say that it's okay to destroy these people's lives for that?
Sure. David, our drug policies in the United States, this prohibition, zero-tolerance drug war is insane. It causes heartbreak, heartaches, breaks up families, destroys neighborhoods, criminalizes The wife of this guy is a civil engineer.
Yeah.
He's a mechanical engineer. These are the people who are the best in math, the smartest people. And so they're smoking some marijuana in the front yard or a hotel room. So what?
Exactly.
So what?
Exactly.
You know,
well, I hope people...
You mentioned the difference between the prohibition of alcohol during the 30s, which Al Capone still thanks us for, here in Chicago especially.
Yes.
But the difference between that and the war on drugs, the difference is, and the reason the war on drugs has been so much more harmful is because you needed capital to go into the alcohol business because it was a bulky substance. You needed trucks and warehouses, and you needed money for those things. But in the war on drugs, we enable any kid with a pair of gym shoes and a pistol to go into the drug war. Because you can put a tremendous amount of money worth of drugs into a pocket without it being a bulge.
Absolutely, absolutely. And certainly there are drugs that are harmful. We're not saying that we are pro-drug. What we're saying is that the way to stop that is not through prohibition, but the way to stop that is through churches, through counseling, through other means that the community has. You know, you don't hit everything with a hammer. You know, there are certain things that it's not appropriate for government to try to solve.
We need policies in place that have people deciding themselves that I'm not going to use drugs.
Exactly.
Not because the government tells me not to, but because I have decided it's not a good idea. And because I'm going to use self-discipline and self-born intelligence and not use drugs.
Absolutely.
I am a former drug prosecutor. I have never used an illicit substance. I am opposed to drug use, but I am heartily more opposed to the war on drugs, which is the heart of the deterioration of the morality and life standards here in the United States and around the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm in the same situation. I don't use drugs, never have used drugs, and it isn't because the government prohibited it. It isn't because the government told me that they would lock me up. It's because I knew I didn't want to use it. And it's never stopped anybody on the basis of don't do it because the government says don't do it, or because the government may lock you up. But let's take it to the bigger picture now. Let's go to the United Nations. You were just at a recent conference in March in Virginia. Tell us about that.
In Vienna. The United Nations headquarters for the Commission on Narcotic Drugs is in Vienna, Austria.
Sorry, I was thinking Vienna, Virginia, but go ahead. Vienna, Austria. Very good. Thank you.
And there's some 185 roughly nation states that have entered into 3 prohibitionist treaties. The first one in 1961, the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. And then there were subsequent treaties in 1971 and 1988. These 3 United Nations treaties are the foundation of prohibition for the world. They are the foundation of drug war for the world. The 1961 convention requires the nation states who are parties to the treaty to go back to their countries and to criminalize the list of drugs contained in those treaties. And that list of drugs, of course, is ever growing and includes the old standbys of cocaine, heroin, marijuana, PCP, angel dust, the new ecstasy, the date rape drugs, pages and pages of drugs. So now Article 36 of that Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs says that the countries have to go back and not only criminalize them, but to provide for prison sentences and for the deprivation of liberty for the violation of the terms of the treaties and the criminal laws that are required to be enacted. Wow. So when I went to Vienna from March 11th to the 15th for the week-long conference, I knew that when the representatives of the world effectively ratified those three treaties, they were mandating that the horrors of drug war continue for another year worldwide. So even though in Mexico they're killing over 60,000 people since Philip Calderon had taken office, and of course he's now out, but it is prohibition that is causing those murders. In Chicago, we have columnists that are writing that we need to start using drones to police the 100,000 gang members who are fighting over the control of drug turf here in Chicago.
Wow. Yeah, it's exactly what, here again, just like the UN Arms Trade Treaty, we see the United Nations creating a set of laws and trying to impose those in different areas. The drugs is just another area where they're doing it.
And it is the United States that has one of the greatest say in what the United Nations does do and doesn't do. Mm-hmm. And there are about 17 countries that are really the leaders in this prohibition movement that require us to continue to criminalize drugs. And it's the heart of the deterioration of morality worldwide, where people don't care about one another, where we have taken the golden rule and shredded it, where somebody gets caught with drugs and the answer to their predicament is forget about your fellow man, rat on the guy who sold to you, put the blame on them. The antithesis of the golden rule.
Yes.
And now we wonder how somebody can come up and empty a gun and somebody laying on the ground. Well, it doesn't matter anymore because we don't care about the other guy.
Absolutely.
We care about how much money we can make in this zero tolerance idiocy. And if I can just throw in, there's a conference going to be held on April the 17th at a college a short distance from where I'm sitting. And the former head of the DEA is going to be one of the speakers. And this person, who, as far as I'm concerned, is responsible for this horror story of drugs everywhere, crime and violence and gangs and corruption and overflowing prisons and the inability for our country to pay our bills. He's going to be over here giving a speech on the harms of marijuana, along with his partner, a doctor, and I don't want to use the names. And these are people who are now making money by selling drug-free workplace things to the Fortune 500 companies of America, who are profiting off of the disaster which they created.
That's absolutely absurd. I was just looking at an article. Marcos, do you have that article I sent you about the health risks of marijuana versus other drugs that are FDA approved? I mean, it's ludicrous, the difference between, when you look at the death rates of those. Maybe I didn't send you that article.
No one has ever died from marijuana, ever.
Absolutely. There we are. We've got the chart right there. 0 deaths from marijuana. You look at all these other drugs, most of them legal, and you look at the tremendous number of deaths that are there. And yet you're talking about former DEA heads. There was just a recent article from the Huffington Post that former DEA heads are calling for the nullification of Colorado and Washington marijuana laws, of course. Along with the United Nations calling for that. So both the United Nations and these DEA heads are all calling to nullify this state law that was passed by a majority of the people. Sure.
And every one of these people is feeding at the trough of drug war.
Yes.
I mean, it's law enforcement, it's the treatment community, it's the prison builders, it's the people who are gobbling up the media money and the anti-drug ads. It's the people who supply the prisons, it's the people who are running the shelters. Every single person who's going to be speaking at this thing, 3 of them, on April the 15th, are all making their living off of the drug war, off of servicing people who are addicted to drugs that are everywhere. My own high school kids that live in my area now have heroin in their well-to-do schools. It's easier for the kids to buy nickel and dime bags of heroin than it is to get a beer or a package of cigarettes, because those substances, which are dangerous, you can't buy them because the licensee is worried about losing their license if they sell to persons of non-age or outside the rules.
Absolutely.
But with a drug war in place, it's the cartels and the street gangs that set the rules. What can be sold? How strong will it be? How will it be packaged? No, there won't be any labeling. What will it be cut with? We don't know. There's no regulations or standards. We got people that are overdosing because they don't know what they're consuming. We got people who friends, their friend falls from drug use and is on the ground, and they're worried about taking him to the hospital for fear that they're going to be arrested for a conspiracy or cooperating in the providing of the drugs or using of the drugs.
You know this so well because you've done this for decades. You saw how it worked. You were a prosecutor in Cook County, And I guess you got into it initially thinking that you were going to do the right thing. You're going to stop drug use through interdiction, and you saw how it worked over time. Is that correct?
David, I was a prosecutor in Chicago in the early 70s, and we didn't have a drug problem to speak of in the early 70s. The Vietnam War was in play, and we had soldiers who were using marijuana and then heroin. So those were problems, but they weren't really a huge problem in the United States until we started the war on drugs. Until 1971, Nixon said we're going to get tough and we're going to prosecute drugs. The best heroin in Chicago in 1970 was 2% pure. Jump forward 40 years of drug war, the kids are now using 90% pure heroin. How does that make the kids safer?
Yes. And we saw the same thing happen with alcohol prohibition. We saw the concentration of what was prohibited go up and the danger accordingly go up because it's kind of an economic issue. They want to move around the most concentrated, potent forms of it.
Sure. The highball was invented during prohibition of alcohol. It didn't exist. You'd bring the flask and you'd buy a 7-Up and you'd pour the booze into it. And now today we've invented crack. It didn't exist until we found out you could take the powder and then with a little recipe and not much work, you could make it into larger quantities in a smokable form, which is one of the most addictive means by which a person can ingest a substance. Because by inhaling, it's the quickest way to get the drug to the brain.
Absolutely. And I have to wonder at the efforts that we see, again, being led by the United Nations with this arms trade treaty, the efforts at gun prohibition, because guns are a large part of have always been a large part of prohibition. Once we do that, I can expect that we're going to see the same sorts of things. We're going to have even less control over firearms, and we're going to see all kinds of new imaginative, dangerous weapons that it's going to increase exponentially, just like we saw the potency of alcohol go up, the potency of all forms of drugs go up after prohibition. We're going to see some really potent firearms if they're successful in creating a prohibition of that substance, because it's just natural. It happens with anything they prohibit.
David, with regard to guns, we need to take away the reason that people are shooting one another.
That's right, and that's the key.
In Chicago, the superintendent of police says 80% of the killings are from gangs fighting over the control of drugs.
Exactly.
Doesn't that tell us something?
Yes.
So if you want to talk about the control of drugs or you want to talk about guns, you need to take away the reason that the people are using the drugs and why the people are buying and using the guns.
Yes, absolutely.
And those are harder questions to answer, but those get to the heart of what's wrong. You can't, by increasing penalties and punishment and building prisons and just saying no, reform what's in people's heads and what's in people's hearts.
Absolutely. We've seen that played out in real life, haven't we, over decades? Well, thank you so much, Jim Gierach. Thank you for speaking out in integrity over what you've seen over decades. You've been there before this all started. You saw it as it grew, as it changed, as they tried pouring it on harder and harder. As you talk about Reagan's zero tolerance and just saying no, they've tried throwing every kind of forceful interdiction to it, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And the absurdity of it with this family is just one of the final straws, hopefully for people to wake up. Thank you for speaking out and telling us what you've seen, because you've been there, you've been on the inside, and you have a wonderful perspective. You've seen how this has failed from a law enforcement perspective, as well as your fellow colleagues at Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I tell everybody to go there. It's Cops. What's the website again? Cops www.leap.cc. Okay. And there's another one, Cops Against Drug, that's an alias citation.
Legalized drugs.
Cops Say Legalized Drugs. There you go.
Leap is easier. Just put in leap.cc.
There you go. Okay. Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you. End the war on drugs. Legalize, control, or regulate drugs. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. There are no controlled substances. There's only controlled people. And where's that control coming from? The United Nations. Just as we see with gun control, with Agenda 21, with so many issues, it is the United Nations that is formulating the laws that are being pushed onto everybody else. It's the United Nations that is calling for the will of the people in Colorado and Washington to be overturned. And it is United Nations that is trying to prohibit guns. And we already see what happens when you prohibit any substance. It gets far more dangerous, and they fail to interdict it. But it creates more power for the government, and they love that. So if you want to know more about what's going on with this, stay tuned to Prison Planet TV. You can get a subscription if you're watching this on YouTube. You can share this subscription with at least 10 other people can be viewing it simultaneously, but you can share it with even more people than that. And we're going to continue to report on all forms of prohibition. Whatever they're trying to prohibit, it is not according to the Constitution, and we're going to fight that. We're going to fight for sanity, and we're going to fight to make sure that families like the Haken family are not destroyed over some kind of petty regulation over the amount of marijuana that they happen to have. It's just absolutely absurd.